Welcome back. There's been a lot going on in the garden and in the field over the last few months, which has made it harder to keep this podcast going. So I decided to skip June because I didn't have a new Better Farming Prairies article to share. At that time, they moved to a bi monthly schedule. And so it makes sense because farmers and agronomists have less time for reading in July and August. And probably the editors like a little break too. So, although it's early August, this is really the July newsletter, just a little bit late because they don't publish again until September, but I do have an article that fits well for August. This break also marks a transition point in my articles. Now, so far this year, I focused mostly on plants, seeds, weeds, rotation, fertilizer, biostimulants. But for the rest of the year, I'm going to dive deeper into the soil. Now, over the years, I've talked to companies at trade shows offering soil solutions that just didn't quite make sense to me. And I knew something didn't add up, but it just didn't have the technical background to explain why. Now, this past winter, I heard the same frustration from a representative of a grower organization. And then that pushed me to dig deeper into this. Now, what started as an idea for one or two articles turned into a four-part series. Each article stands on its own, but they build on each other. So this month, I'm starting with the concept of a tight soil. Water pooling, poor growth, and areas that just never seem to perform are often described as tight soils. The challenge is that a tight soil isn't a diagnosis. It's the description of a symptom, and that symptom can come from many different causes. In case you're new here, I'm Scott Gillespie, an Alberta-based writer and independent agronomy consultant. My work focuses on realistic regen ag for organic and conventional farms. I provide practical, science backed advice shaped by 2 decades of experience across a range of farming systems, with particular expertise in irrigated production. Now, you're listening to this as a podcast. You might be watching it on YouTube. It also comes as a newsletter that I just send to your email using MailChimp. It also can go to your LinkedIn feed by signing up for the newsletter there, and it also sends a reminder in your email. So, on to the main content for today, diagnosing tight soils. The same symptoms can point to different causes. So, if water is sitting on the surface, the first assumption is often compaction. And sometimes that's correct. Heavy equipment, repeated traffic, and working the soil when it's too wet can all create layers that roots and water struggle to move through. But that's not the only possibility. Water may be getting into the soil and then stopping at a restrictive layer below. Poor growth can be caused by salts, sodium, deep compaction, or a combination of these problems. From the road, those situations can look similar, but below the surface, they're very different. And if the cause is different, the solution is different. This is where misdiagnosis becomes expensive. If the problem is physical compaction, then targeted tillage, traffic management, and roots may have a role. And I'll have more on that next month. If the problem is salinity, the issue is excess salts in the soil water. If the problem is sodicity, sodium is affecting the soil structure itself. If it's solonetzic, the surface may look fairly normal while a dense sodic layer underneath impedes rooting and water movement. So they're not all the same problem. Common diagnosis is alkali. It gets used for almost any poor performing patch where salts show up on the surface. But alkali refers to high pH, not simply the presence of salts. A saline patch and a sodic or alkali soil can overlap, but they're not the same thing. Another example is magnesium. In some circles, magnesium gets blamed for tight soils because it often shows up at high levels in those areas. Now, there can be some truth to this concern, but it's easy to take that too far. It's true, magnesium can contribute to a tighter feeling soil, especially in heavy clay soils, but it does not disperse soil the way sodium does. When soil structure is truly breaking down, sodium is often the bigger issue. Here's an analogy that I have in the article. A useful way to think about this is a dry fitted stone wall, like those built across Britain. Think of the classic images of the Scottish lowlands or the Irish countryside. These walls are stacked together without mortar, and their strength comes from how well the stones fit together. A master builder sorts, splits, and chips stones so that they fit together. The wall is solid and it handles pressure well. In the soil, calcium is the master builder. A wall built without tools may still stand, but it's less refined. The stones are placed with care, but the builder has to work with what's available. Magnesium works in a similar way. It holds soil particles together, but it's not as effective as calcium. Sodium is very different. It's like clearing stones from a field and piling them along the edge. There's no fitting or shaping, there's no real wall, and any force will cause the stones to move. So before reaching for a product, a deep ripper, or a simple explanation, it's worth asking a few basic questions. Where is the problem in the field? Is it in a low spot, a headland, or a repeating landscape pattern? Does water stay on the surface, or does it enter the soil and stop deeper down? How does it compare with a better performing area? A shovel can tell you a lot. A soil probe can help, but I've become a big fan of the Dutch auger. If you want to see what a Dutch auger looks like, look at the thumbnail or go to the post on my website in the episode description. Why I like the Dutch auger is because it lets you pull soil out in layers. You can feel the changes in resistance. You can see differences in soil moisture and texture, and you can identify where the soil changes with depth. It's a simple tool, but it makes the soil profile visible in a way that surface observation never can. A penetrometer, which is in the same picture but it's on the right side, can also be useful, especially when you're trying to put numbers to a suspected compaction layer. It has to be used carefully. Soil moisture changes the reading, and a dry soil will always be harder. The number matters, but so does the pattern. A sudden jump in resistance followed by a drop can tell you more than just one reading by itself. The full Better Farming Prairies article goes into this in more detail. The goal is to build a practical way of thinking through these fields before jumping to a fix. Because Better Farming Prairies does not publish in August, I'm going to take a short detour next month before continuing the magazine series. So next month's newsletter will focus on physical compaction, based on an article published by Lethbridge County in the spring, using roots to manage compaction, when steel helps and when it doesn't. That piece looks at where tillage can help, where it falls short, and why roots need to follow any mechanical intervention if the benefit is going to last. It also gets into cover crops, perennials, and the limits of expecting roots to fix a layer that the cash crop itself cannot penetrate. In September, I'll pick up the Better Farming Prairies series with a look at the categories of chemically tight soils, saline-sodic, and solonetzic soils. That article gets in the difference between salts in the soil water and sodium held in the soil, along with the lab tests needed to separate those problems. In October, I'll look at what can be realistically done about saline and sodic soils. That one is built around the simple idea: water movement drives remediation. If water cannot move through the soil, salts and sodium cannot be moved out of the root zone. The final article in November will deal with the tougher cases: saline-sodic and solonetzic soils. Those are situations where fixing one part of the problem can make another part worse, and where the expectations need to be realistic. So again, the path from here is July or early August, as it is right now. Starts with diagnosis. August takes on the physical compaction detour. September gets into the definitions and lab tests. October looks at remediation for saline and sodic soils. And November covers the more complex saline, sodic, and solonetzic soils. By the end, the goal is not to have one magic answer for tight soils. The goal is to know which problem you're actually dealing with and what kind of response has a realistic chance of working. So to read the complete article, go to the episode description and you'll get an article link there. Or you can just go to Better Farming Prairies and look for the July-August 2026 edition and go to page 41. So thanks for your attention. If something resonated, please let me know. I love to hear from people. Also, sharing this edition in your social networks, whether a post to a small group of friends, colleagues, or clients, is very much appreciated. You can also support me by picking up a copy of my book, Practical Regeneration, or reaching out for agronomy support. And all the information is on my website, www.plantsdigsoil.com. So here's to growing more, believing less, and always digging a little deeper.